Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we need to have a very serious conversation about something that directly affects millions of Australians, especially those who were born after 1960. I'm talking about the age pension, superannuation, and the future of financial security for older Australians. This isn't just a policy issue or a set of numbers on a government website. This is about whether people who have worked their entire lives will actually have enough to live on when they retire. And the truth is, if you were born after 1960, the protection and security that previous generations relied on is changing in ways that many people don't fully understand. For decades, the age pension has been one of the pillars of retirement in Australia. People worked, paid taxes, contributed to the system, and when they reached retirement age, the government provided financial support to help cover basic living costs. It was never meant to make people wealthy, but it was meant to guarantee dignity and security in old age. For people born in the 1940s and 1950s, that promise still largely held true. But if you were born in 1960 or later, you are now living in a very different reality. The first major change that affects this group is the retirement age itself. Not that long ago, Australians could retire and access the age pension at 65. But reforms gradually increased the qualifying age. For those born in 1957, the age pension age is already 66 and a half. And for everyone born after January 1, 1957, the pension age has been raised to 67. That means if you were born in 1960 or later, you cannot access the age pension until age 67. That's 2 extra years of working or somehow surviving without the support that older generations received earlier. For someone who is already struggling in their early 60s, this change is a very big deal. But the retirement age is just the beginning. There is another deeper issue: pension protection. In the past, the age pension was seen as a guarantee. If you lived in Australia, worked here, and reached the right age, you could count on it. But the system today is far more complex. The government applies means testing, which looks at both your income and your assets. That means if you have even a modest level of savings, a small property, or income from superannuation, the amount of pension you get will be reduced. In other words, it is no longer a universal safety net. It is conditional, and the conditions are stricter than ever. For people born after 1960, this is particularly important because many are now in their late 50s or early 60s, just a few years away from retirement. And they are starting to discover that what they thought they would get may not be what they actually receive. For example, someone who has worked their whole life and saved in superannuation might believe they are secure. But when the government applies the means test, their age pension could be reduced to a fraction of what they expected, or in some cases denied altogether. That means their financial plan has to be much stronger than previous generations because there is less protection from the system itself. Another factor that makes this more urgent is the rising cost of living in Australia. Housing, healthcare, groceries, and energy bills have all climbed significantly in recent years. The pension payments, while adjusted for inflation, have not kept pace with the true cost of living for older Australians. Many seniors today already struggle to pay rent, cover medical costs, and maintain a decent standard of living. For those who are about to retire in the coming decade, especially people born in the early 1960s, this situation could be even harder. Let's take a closer look at how the pension works. Right now, the maximum age pension for a single person is enough to cover only basic needs. But if you have savings or assets, the government reduces your payment under the means test. This was designed to ensure that people with higher wealth do not receive as much government support. On paper, it seems fair. In practice, it punishes people who did the right thing by saving, especially middle-income Australians who are not rich but not poor either. They can end up with too much to qualify for the full pension but not enough to actually live comfortably without it. So here is the real warning. If you were born after 1960, you cannot rely on the age pension as your main or only source of retirement income. The government has shifted responsibility onto individuals, and that means your financial security depends heavily on your superannuation and personal savings. Superannuation itself has its own set of rules, restrictions, and uncertainties, and while it is a good system in many ways, it was never meant to completely replace the age pension. Yet for people born after 1960, that is essentially what is happening. The age pension has become a backup instead of a guarantee. This shift has huge consequences for people approaching retirement. It means you need to plan earlier, save more, and be very careful with how you use your super. It also means that if you are in your late 50s or early 60s today, you need to be realistic about what life will look like once you turn 67. Will you still be able to work until then? Will your health allow it? Do you have savings that will last through those years before the pension kicks in? These are difficult questions, but they are necessary. Another issue worth noting is that the government has the power to change the rules again in the future. Some policy experts have already suggested that the pension age could rise even further, perhaps to 70, in the decades ahead. If that happens, people born in the mid-1960s or later could be forced to wait even longer. And once again, that would mean more years of financial stress for people who may not be able to continue working. For women in particular, the situation is even more difficult. Many women born after 1960 spent part of their lives out of the workforce raising children or caring for family members. That means they often have smaller super balances compared to men. When the pension is restricted and superannuation is lower, the risk of poverty in old age becomes very high. Research already shows that older women are one of the fastest growing groups experiencing homelessness in Australia, and the changes to pension protection are only going to make that worse if people are not prepared. So what can you do about it? The first step is awareness. You need to understand that the system has changed, and you cannot assume the age pension will be there for you in the way it was for your parents. The second step is to take control of your own financial planning as early as possible. That means looking at your superannuation balance, understanding how the rules work, and thinking carefully about how you will use it. It may also mean seeking professional advice to make sure you are not caught by surprise later. But planning isn't just about money. It is also about your health, your work situation, and your living arrangements. If you plan to keep working until 67 or later, you need to think about whether your job is sustainable as you get older. If it is physically demanding or high stress, you may need a backup plan. If you are renting, you need to consider how rent increases will affect you once you are on a fixed income. If you own a home, you need to think about whether it is practical to maintain as you age. These are all difficult issues, but they are part of the reality for people born after 1960. Because there's still a lot to unpack. We've already established that people born after 1960 are in a very different position compared to earlier generations when it comes to pensions and retirement. The rules are tougher, the protections are weaker, and the financial burden has shifted onto individuals. Now, let's dig into the latest policy updates, the superannuation system, and practical steps that can help you prepare for what's coming. The most important change to understand is how much the age pension now depends on the means test. The test looks at two main things: your income and your assets. Income can include money you earn, interest from savings, or payments from your superannuation account. Assets include property, cars, investments, and other valuables, though the family home is exempt. The government sets thresholds for both income and assets, and if you go above those limits, your pension gets reduced. For someone who has worked hard, saved responsibly, and maybe owns a modest home, this can create an unfair squeeze. They might not qualify for a full pension, but they also don't have enough to live comfortably without it. That's why so many financial experts warn people born after 1960 that the age pension is no longer a guaranteed safety net. Instead, it functions more like a supplement, something to top up your income, but not something you can fully depend on. This shift is one of the reasons the government has invested so much emphasis on superannuation. Super is designed to provide retirement income based on the contributions you and your employers have made over the years. Since 1992, compulsory super contributions have been building up balances for workers, but here's the catch. If you were born before 1960, you spent much of your career without the benefit of compulsory super. If you were born after 1960, you probably had super for most of your working life, but because of wage gaps, career breaks, and the high cost of living, many people still don't have enough saved. The current recommendation is that retirees need around 2/3 of their working income to maintain their lifestyle in retirement. Yet studies show that a large percentage of Australians born in the 1960s are not on track to meet that goal. Super balances are unevenly distributed, and many people nearing retirement today will depend heavily on the pension despite government intentions. This creates a dangerous gap. The government is offering less support, but many individuals do not have enough in super to replace it. The truth is that Australia's pension system was designed decades ago under different economic conditions. Back then, life expectancy was shorter, housing was more affordable, and costs were lower. Today, people are living longer, healthcare expenses are higher, and younger generations often carry debt well into their 40s and 50s. People born after 1960 are expected to live into their late 80s or beyond, which means retirement could easily last 20 or even 30 years. That's a long time to cover expenses with limited pension payments and uncertain savings. Another recent development is the tightening of rules around accessing superannuation. While super is meant for retirement, there have been debates about allowing early access in times of financial stress. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, many Australians withdrew from their super balances early. While that provided short-term relief, it left many people with smaller balances for retirement. People born after 1960 who access super early may now find themselves with a serious shortfall later on. And because the pension is restricted, that shortfall may never be filled. So what does all this mean in practical terms? It means that if you're in your late 50s or early 60s today, you need to take stock of your situation right now. Don't wait until you turn 67 to find out you don't qualify for the support you thought you'd get. Look at your superannuation statement, understand how much you'll have at retirement, and calculate what that means on a yearly basis. Think about whether you'll own your home outright or whether you'll still be paying rent or a mortgage. Remember that housing is one of the biggest costs in retirement, and not having secure housing makes pension changes even more dangerous. There are also practical steps you can take to protect yourself. First, focus on maximizing your super contributions if you are still working. Even a few extra years of contributions can make a meaningful difference when spread over retirement. Second, be strategic about how you use your assets. Because of the means test, how you hold your money can affect how much pension you receive. For example, money inside super may be treated differently from money outside it. This is why many people seek professional financial advice before retirement, to make sure they are structuring their assets in the most efficient way. Health planning is another crucial step. Working until 67 or later may be possible for some, but not for everyone. Jobs that are physically demanding or mentally exhausting may not be sustainable as you age. If you are still in your late 50s, it may be time to think about whether you need to shift into work that is more manageable long-term. It's not just about money, it's about being able to make it to pension age without burning out or breaking down. There's also a social aspect to this issue. Older Australians often feel like they are being blamed for relying on pensions, but the truth is, this is a systemic problem. The government's changes are shifting responsibility onto individuals, but not everyone has equal opportunities to save. People with low wages, insecure work, or time out of the workforce are at a disadvantage. If you were born after 1960 and fit into one of those categories, you're more vulnerable than ever. And this is why awareness and planning are so important, because the system will not automatically protect you. We also need to consider the possibility of future policy changes. Right now, the pension age is 67 for people born after 1960, but there have been public discussions about raising it further. Imagine being told you now have to wait until 70. For someone in their early 60s today, that would mean working for almost another decade before receiving support. This is not just a hypothetical idea, it is something that governments around the world are already considering due to budget pressures and longer lifespans. If you were born after 1960, you need to prepare for the possibility that the goalposts will move again. So let's bring this together. If you were born after 1960, here is the reality. The age pension is not a secure foundation you can fully rely on. It is a conditional payment, tied to means testing, and subject to political changes. Your main financial protection is your own superannuation and savings. That means your future stability depends on the decisions you make now, in your 50s and 60s, not later when it's too late. But even though this reality can sound discouraging, it is not hopeless. There are still ways to create a secure retirement. By planning carefully, making informed choices, and staying aware of changes, you can reduce your risk of financial hardship. It starts with knowledge, understanding the system as it exists today, not as it existed for your parents. It continues with action, contributing more to super if possible, reviewing your financial position regularly, and adjusting your expectations realistically. And finally, it requires resilience, preparing yourself emotionally and practically for the challenges that come with aging in a system that provides less safety than before. As we close, I want you to take away one clear message. If you were born after 1960, you must take responsibility for your retirement in a way that earlier generations did not have to. The age pension is no longer a guaranteed shield against poverty in old age. It is a limited tool, with strict conditions, and it may not be enough to cover your needs. That means the steps you take today will shape the kind of life you live in your 70s and beyond. Remember what we've discussed. The pension age has already risen to 67 and could go higher. The means test reduces payments for anyone with modest assets. Superannuation is essential but often not enough on its own, and cost of living pressures make retirement more expensive than ever before. These are not just numbers. They are realities that will affect your daily life. So don't wait. Review your finances now. Talk to trusted advisors if you can. Think about your housing, your health, and your long-term goals. Take control while you still have time. Because the truth is, for people born after 1960, there is no longer pension protection in the way older generations knew it. The responsibility now lies with you. And that's why this warning matters. By understanding the changes, preparing ahead of time, and staying informed, you give yourself the best chance of living with dignity, independence, and peace of mind in your retirement years. Thank you for staying with me through this important conversation. I know it isn't always easy to hear these truths, but knowledge is power. The more you know about how the system really works, the better prepared you'll be. Stay strong, stay aware, and remember, your future security depends on the choices you make today.